are back with Titus Cooks. Today we are making chocolate brownies, and we're going to make also chocolate cookies with the exact same recipe. It's a new experiment I'm going to try. I've never done this before, so we'll see if it works out. All right, so we're going to start very simple. This is a Hershey's chocolate recipe. It's a very classic recipe. It's the brownie recipe I've followed for years and years. So Hershey's, remember that? Send me some swag. Just kidding. I'm not really pushing for swag. I think a Hershey's t-shirt would be really cool though. Or brown shoes. Something like that. Okay, so what we're going to start with, when we make these, we're going to make them basically the same way we do cookies. So we start with our fat, and we add our sugar to it, any liquids, our eggs, our vanilla, and then separately we're going to get our dry ingredients ready. So we'll get those ready in a separate bowl, and then we'll combine them. The first one, we make them here for the brownie portion of the show. We're gonna melt the butter. So that's what I'll start with, and we start with 1 cup of butter. So I've got 1 cup all wrapped up here, ready to go.
What are you making?
We're making brownies, chocolate brownies. So with these brownies, there's lots of different ways you can adjust them. You can add nuts to them. We don't do a lot of nuts here in school because there's a lot of nut allergies.
I'm not a big fan of nuts.
Okay.
Although I may not be allergic to them.
You're just not a fan of them. Yeah, that's the same thing with a lot of foods. Some people don't like mushrooms, some people don't like cilantro, which baffles me. How could people not like cilantro of all things? Okay, so I got that butter going, and we're gonna melt it. And then what I'll do is I'll get my bowl ready. Oh. There we go, that's probably the right size to start with. So I'm gonna get 2 cups of sugar, which we have here in a deli cup, and look, it says sugar. Sugar. So I get that in there, and once that butter's melted, I'm going to add it. But in the meantime, I can get my other things ready. I'm going to add my teaspoon of vanilla. That's really a teaspoon, believe me. And then I'm going to get my eggs. I've got 4 eggs, and what I'll do is I'll crack them ahead of time, because as we all know, we don't want those shells to fall into our batter once we get it all put together, okay? So we do the eggs in a separate container, just for the very purpose that I do that every time, don't I? I think that's so clever. I drop a big eggshell in there and to demonstrate, but usually it's a small eggshell, right? My little whisk, I'll whisk these up so they're broken up a bit, so when I add them, everything will mix in nice and easy. My butter's almost melted, so one thing, once we get this going, we want to add the melted butter, but it's going to be hot. But we also want to make sure we stir it enough that it will cool off enough, so when we add the eggs to it, the eggs won't cook any. If you add eggs to something hot, they start cooking. And so we want to be really careful not to add them when the butter's really hot, because then you'll get splotches. You get little bits of cooked egg that you don't want in your brownies. Hear that sound? Ooh, I love that sound of melting butter. I love the sound of melting butter. That's I'm trying to remember the singer of that song. That's from my punk rock days back in the 80s. Okay, nobody had a song about melting butter. It's a joke. Okay, I'm stirring this up. It's gonna cool off pretty quickly. It's not gonna cool off completely, but we stir it in. You can see there's some of the little vanilla in there that when I put it into the sugar, it kind of clumps up, but when you stir it, those will break up, no problem. I'll check it. Yep, no problem. It's ready to go. It's room temperature now, basically. So I've got a really good technique. If you're doing this by hand, you want to put a towel underneath it. It will keep the bowl from really moving a lot, especially if you use a wet towel. And then I'm lucky, I have like kind of a big belly, so I lean it against here, and that keeps it from moving. So this is good for men like me, and for pregnant women are really good at mixing brownies like this. All right, so slowly adding that in. It's pretty much ready to go there. I can add it all in. Perfect. So now we have a nice cohesive, everything's mixed in nicely. You might want to grab your spatula and wipe down the sides, because I just noticed there's some sugar up here on the edges. We want to make sure we get all of that in there. All right, that's really nice. So next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get my dry ingredients ready. So what I'll do today, I forgot to bring my, I washed everything yesterday, so my screen isn't here. So I'm going to grab one really quick because I feel like I need to teach this correctly. I have 1 cup of flour. So the first thing I'll do the flour in, right into that, the shaker, the screen, and then I'm going to add my cocoa right on top of that. And then we will put our baking powder, which is a 1/2 teaspoon, right into there. And then our salt. I have my salt right here, which is a 1/2 teaspoon. So that goes in there. And then I'm just going to shake. Shake, shake, shake. Shake, shake, shake. That's, who is that? Oh my goodness. Eric, who sings Shake My Booty? Shake my booty. Cool. No. It's the other one. He was a dancer and everything. Oh well. It will come back to me. Okay, so now I have all my dry ingredients, and you can see they're pretty well mixed together. It's blended. You can see there's a little bit of white. There's the chocolate, the white. But when you go like this, or you can use your whisk is to stir it up so it's all blended very nicely. And then slowly we add it. Okay. Casey and the Sunshine Band, that's the one. Those were the good days. Back when people wore bell bottoms. That has to do with Casey, I don't know. And we're just gonna blend it in slowly. I'm gonna use, actually it probably would have been smarter if I started with this, because then we can just fold everything in and we can get things off the edges also at the same time. All right, that's starting to look good. See, I'm kind of making a mess. I'm knocking stuff out of the bowl. That's what happens. This is the real world of cooking. This is no show on the Food Network. This is the real world. There they have 10 people setting up your station, and they've got 10 cameramen, and well, here it's just me and Eric. Humble. It's a very humble cooking show, I like to say. Okay, so now it's really looking beautiful. It gets really glistening, as you can see, as everything gets mixed in. That's the eggs. The eggs are holding everything together. The chocolate's doing its best to release all its flavor. It's ready to make a really good brownie. Okay, and so usually a recipe will tell you what size pan to use. I think this recipe says it's like a 13 by 9-inch pan, which I would say, let's see, that's probably like 10 by 10. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a pan that will, when we put the brownies in, we don't want them too thin because they're not going to be nice and gooey in the middle, but we don't want them too thick because the outside is going to cook a lot and the inside will be a little bit gooey. Not really what we want. So we want a pan that's just right. So I'm looking at, I think I'm going with this pan. I think it's a 10 by 10. So we're going the 10 by 10 route today. So we could do a couple things. We could put some oil on the bottom, throw a little flour in there, and that will help it keep from sticking. Or we can go the old route with the parchment paper. So the way I do the parchment is I will trace around it with my Sharpie, and I'm a big Sharpie fan too, so Sharpie, send me some swag. I love my swag joke. I think I'm the only one laughing at it, or maybe you guys are laughing at it, but you're all muted on Zoom, okay? And so now we're going to cut this, but remember I traced around the outside of the pan, so I kind of cut on the inside of the line. So that will ensure that it fits into the pan. If you cut to the outside, you're going to have a little bit overlapping that's going to kind of go up the edges. I don't really want that, okay? And we won't need to do the, I'll get that later. I won't need to do the edges because we can later, after it's cooked, if they're sticking to the edges, we can just go around with a spatula and wipe it off, okay? So that fits nice. I'll put a little bit of oil on the bottom of the pan, and then I'm going to take I remembered to get some paper towel this morning, because usually it's the one thing I forget, and I'll spread it with my hands or I'll spread it with a towel. Here we go. I get all the edges, I get the bottom, and then the reason we do this, that makes sure that when you put your paper in there, it sticks, okay? Sometimes if you don't do that and you pour your batter in there, what might happen, the batter might like push the paper to the side, and so you don't get a complete coverage of the bottom, okay? And we don't want that. All right, so next thing, we have our batter is all ready to go. I'm gonna go right into the pan. Okay, just like that. I'm gonna wipe it in there. Make sure, chocolate's a very expensive product, cocoa, expensive, so get it all out of there. And then if you don't quite get it all, you're gonna have somebody in the house that wants to lick the bowl, right? Not me. It's gonna be Eric today. Eric's gonna lick that bowl for us, but not on air. Okay, so next thing we'll do, if you have a spatula,
I really love tasting the mixture.
yeah, that's really important. I guess I should taste the mixture too, just to make sure that, yep, we didn't use salt instead of sugar, and we didn't. So what I'm gonna do, if you have a spatula,
Like one time when my dad accidentally put salt in mom's coffee.
accidentally. Right, I got it.
Would make a good prank though.
I know, right? Okay, so see how I'm spreading this all the way around. Get all the corners nicely. Well, I did have a spatula, didn't I? What did I do with that? It's crazy how in a small space like this, I can lose so much stuff very quickly. All right, so we've got everything in there. It tastes perfect. I love the taste of brownie mix. If you want, you can kind of go like this. It makes it settle in there. So I've got the oven on at, I'm using a convection oven, so I have it on at 325. If you're using a home oven, use about 350 if it doesn't have the circulating air, okay? So I'll put this in the oven real quick. Okay, so next thing we're gonna do, so I told you I'm gonna do a little experiment. We're gonna make some cookies now using the same recipe, okay? Never done this before, so this could be a failure or it could be a huge hit. So remember, we're starting with 1 cup of butter. So I'm gonna cut this up a little bit, and instead of melting the butter, we're gonna,
This can be done. I might give her a go.
there you go. I like that, Robert. I like your get-to-itiveness. Okay, so instead of melting the butter, we're gonna put the butter in here and we are going to let it blend, all right? And what I think this might do is we might,
How I start doing these, I just put the butter in and cream it together with the sugar.
there you go, exactly. That's, so that's like the way that I've talked about how we make our cookies all the time. We start with our fat, which is our butter. We put it in the mixer and then we add our sugars to it and any other of the wet ingredients. So I've got my butter going there. I'm going to add 2 cups of sugar. All right, there's 1 cup. And we want 2 cups. And you really want to make sure when you do this is that your,
I use 1 cup of white sugar and 1 cup of brown sugar.
there you go. Yep, every recipe is a little bit different. Okay, so now you can see one thing we want to make sure is when we do this, we use room temperature butter because it will blend in really nicely, okay? So this butter, you can see it was sticking.
Just came out of the fridge, it's really hard.
Exactly. So this one was not,
This softened butter feature.
yep, that's what the softened butter does. It makes it blend. It's easier to cream with the butter and the sugar, okay? So now we're gonna add a teaspoon of vanilla to this, and I'll get my eggs ready. And we'll do the eggs the same way. We'll put them in a container of their own so we're not risking getting eggshell into the mixture, into the batter. Whoa, broke that egg kind of funny. I think it's interesting how when you crack eggs, no 2 eggs crack the same way. Kind of like a snowflake. No 2 snowflakes are exactly alike, right? Interesting. Ever thought about that, conspiracy theorists? All right, so now we're gonna blend up our eggs a little bit. Looking down there, and I'm using this because we're making pretty much the same recipe and it has that chocolate flavor on it. I want to make sure we get down to the bottom, because often what happens in these KitchenAids is the bottom of these bowls, some of the flour or some of the butter and the sugar will kind of harden in the bottom, so you get some clumps. So you just want to make sure you get that out of the bottom. We're nicely creaming it up. I'm going to slowly add the eggs to it, our 4 eggs. And once we get this all in there, I'll turn it down. I'll let it continue blending. But now we can get all of our dry ingredients together. So we're going to do 3/4 cup of cocoa. We're going to do 1 cup of flour. So let me see, I've got so many containers over here today. I look like a factory. Okay, so I'll start with the flour. So I got a scoop of flour. I cut off the top. You're probably out of camera there, but okay, so see I have a flat 1 cup of flour. We'll put that in there, and then I'm going to go over and I'm going to get 3/4 cup of chocolate cocoa, Hershey's cocoa. That's going to go right into the screen. I'm going to get our baking powder, which I'm going to look at that recipe because I already forgot how much. It's 1/2 teaspoon. So you can use a 1/2 teaspoon, or I just use a whole teaspoon and just fill it halfway. And then about a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We're going to shake that in there. Get everything through. All those little pieces, we just push them through. We'll go ahead and mix it up a bit like this, or we can use our whisk to make sure it's all blended nicely. And now I'm going to go back one more time. We will brush down the sides of the bowl, make sure we get everything out of the bottom, and we can start adding our dry ingredients. So it's the same process as when we make cookies. We start with the fats, the sugars, the wet ingredients, and then we add the dry ingredients, okay? So it's really what I'm trying to get everybody to understand. That's how these things are made. Just need to follow those simple instructions and you'll have a perfect product every time, unless of course you burn them. Then it's not being quite so perfect, but your parents will eat the cookies and say, these are good, because parents love you. Right, parents? All right, and so now I have everything about ready to go. And since I'm making cookies, I'm going to call them brownie cookies. I'm going to add a couple extra things to them. I'm going to add about 1/2 cup of chocolate chips. There we go. Or we can refer to them as chocolate cookies. And then I thought, well, I haven't used coconut in quite a while, and I do love coconut. So I'm going to put a cup of coconut. Okay. So now we have, yep, brownie cookies. That's exactly what we're making. So now we have everything mixed in, but then I added those 2 extra things. And if at this point, if you like nuts, you could add those in too. Me and Robert, we're not huge nut fans, so we're staying away from that, right, Robert? So I'm wiping down everything. I'm lowering the machine. I've got, in addition to the brownie recipe, I've added some coconut and some chocolate chips. And we get our pan. I've got my parchment paper on here. If you don't have parchment paper, you should probably put some, spread it with a little oil or do some pan spray. Whenever I do these, do as I say, not as I do. So when you're ready to start scooping, get this beater, get this paddle out of there, because I hardly ever do this. I'll start scooping everything out, but the paddle will be in the way, and it'll take me forever to work around it when I could have just taken it out right at the beginning and not had to deal with it, okay? So it makes it very simple now. If you're not going to work with this right away, you can put this in a storage container, keep it in the refrigerator overnight or for a half hour or something. It'll firm up a little more. So we'll go like this now. I like to keep it in here because when I'm scooping now, I can hold this like this and move it around. If I'm scooping something over here, every time I have to reach and go like this, but this is a nice thing about using these mixing bowls is you have a handle, you just move around if it's not too heavy. We drop these on the cookie sheet, I guess we'll call it, just like that. And as I it does, doesn't it, right? So we'll call them chocolate brownie ice cream cookies. How's that? Okay, so now I don't know how much they're gonna spread out. I'm hoping not too much, because if they do, they're gonna hit each other, and we don't want them to run into each other. Okay, so I got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 total. So what I like to do is know how many I'm doing, especially if I'm doing for a lot of people. Because if I have to do for 50 people, we've got how much? 3, 15, so we do 15, 30. So I'd probably do 4 sheet pans if I was making these for 60 people. Then we'd have at least 50 plus an extra 10 for people to eat, for my employees to eat. And then, since I put some coconut inside of them, I'm going to put a little bit on top just for garnish. Okay, if you wanted to, you could push down while you're doing this and you get a little flatter cookie. I just didn't want to do it because I'm afraid of these cookies. All right, so a little bit of coconut on top. These are going to go in the oven. We're going to see how they turn out. And this is kind of the fun of cooking for me, is coming up with new ideas and new ways to do things. All right, so I'm going to pop these in the oven. I'm going to give them probably 10 minutes to be done. I almost forgot to set the timer, which as you get older, make sure you set the timer because we forget stuff as we get older, okay? So timer's on. I put it at about 8 minutes, so when it goes off, I'll run over there and check it. The brownies are going to take a lot longer. They're going to take probably 30 minutes, but what we're going to do is once at about 20 minutes, I'll go check them. I'll take a thermometer, I'll stick it in the middle, and if it's around 200 and 205, they're ready to come out. Another way is if you don't have a thermometer, you take a little like bamboo skewer or even a knife, you stick it in the middle, pull it out. If there's anything stuck to it, then it's not ready. If there's like crumbs, dry crumbs stuck to it, it's ready. That usually doesn't happen, but if there's like the batter is still not done, you'll be able to tell, okay? So you'll just keep cooking it. If the top of it's cooking too much and you stick it in and it's really still raw in the middle, you can do a couple things. You can turn the temperature down a little bit, or you can put a pan or some foil over the top to keep them from cooking, okay? If you're doing brownies, it's easy to put a pan over that. Cookies, you usually won't have this problem. You would want to turn down the temperature on cookies. You don't really want to put anything over the top of cookies because it'll probably touch the top of the cookie and kind of ruin their look, okay? So that's what we got going for today. So make sure, I always look at that. So remember to get in the kitchen, get your knives sharpened, and keep on cooking. And we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Kitus Cooks. Thank y'all.